Hello, Team Phoenix. Welcome to this show. Welcome on YouTube. Welcome on LinkedIn. If you are live, welcome. Please ask a lot of questions. I have an amazing guest today. And if you see the recording, don't be shy. Just send some comments in. We will see them afterwards on the YouTube stream and on LinkedIn also. And with this, a big welcome to Marjorie. I always let my guests introduce themselves, so I'm do this a bit lazy. I'm sorry about that, but you get the chance to actually introduce yourself. Please tell us who you are and what inspires you.
Yeah, no, hey, thank you. And thank you for inviting me, Patrick. Truly excited to be here and to get a chance to talk with your audience and the rest of the watchers on this very important topic. But, to introduce myself, and one of the big things I like to talk about is how you introduce yourself is extremely important. So this is going to be one of our discussion points. And, I always like to introduce myself with the notion of I'm a leader that likes to come into a conversation and really understand the why of why we're here and what we're doing here today. And my why of being here today is, I want to inspire others to feel more comfortable to be able to have this type of conversation. I was reading your book earlier today, Patrick, and this notion of being able to have the mindset that anyone can do whatever they put their mind to is part of why I'm here today. So to demonstrate to folks that anyone can be an SE, anyone can be a social SE, and anyone can be a leader. So let's talk about it.
Amazing. That was a great introduction. How does it come that you say you're a fan of that and you kind of study this, or you train people on doing this, or you coach them?
I've actually done a lot of reading on the topic, and I'll tell you how it started. It started back, gosh, it was probably 2014, 2015. And, I was leading the Western SE organization for a company called Symantec. And we had to come together and present to our SE teams. And I wanted to come and really be very intentional about the topics that we were talking about. So I did some research and I found some content by Simon Sinek. And I've been a huge fan ever since. I've, loved his content. And I find that individuals really are able to resonate with understanding your why, and then you can really create that connection. So one, I've read a lot of the content. Two, yes, whenever I can, I bring the training to my team. So we've done workshops with leadership teams, with individual teams, just on building your why statement and really understanding the power of it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I did this with an ex-colleague before. There is a find your why for the team, and you shouldn't be that close, right? But you should know each other and trust each other. And then we did this. It was a revelation for my colleague. I was the moderator, and I asked him questions about the past. It was amazing, right? Nice one. That's great. And tell me again, because I thought you said it's even more important in your introduction. So are there some secrets if I should introduce the next stream? What should I say? Or are there techniques?
Yeah, I think it's more about your brand statement, right? So a lot of times you walk into a meeting and people ask you to introduce yourself, and they already know your name, right? They can see the agenda, and you start off, well, I'm Patrick, and I am, do this podcast called Sales Hero, and I'm here. I've been here for 3 years, and I'm located in, whatever location, right, in New Jersey.
Bavaria.
What does that tell people about you? That tells people nothing, right? That tells people just where you're located and what your name is. Big deal.
Yeah.
You want people to know who you are and why you're in that room. What's your purpose? Yeah. What value are you going to add? So I've actually done a couple of workshops on this, on just the power of your introduction and how it can really change the way people perceive you in a meeting and the way people will then engage you in that conversation.
Yeah, amazing. And is this, from your perspective, is this even more important for women today as a leader?
I think it's important for anyone, right?
Sure.
And I mean, yes, I do it primarily for women because I think women struggle with it, let me find my place in the conversation. But I think it's extremely important for any individual to have a very clearly defined brand statement, because what you want to do is have your brand be defined by you versus your brand be defined by someone else based off of a minor interaction that they might have had with you.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Why do you have this passion? Was there something in your life that you started saying, well, I now I figure this out now?
Oh my gosh. So it's funny you say that. So several years ago, and maybe you've done this, and probably your audience has done it, but we've done these thing called 360 reviews, right? Where you send out the survey to your peers, and they all answer a bunch of questions, and then it comes back and it tells you what everyone thinks about you. And I always consider myself a collaborator, someone who's willing to work with the team. And my survey results came back, and they're like, she's very aggressive, and she doesn't listen, and she doesn't do that. I was like, oh, I was floored. I was like, where did this come from? And I was extremely disappointed that was the brand that had existed by the people I had selected. But two, that was not ever my intention, right? My intention has always been to be an individual that collaborates. So yes, I made it very intentional from that point forward to make sure that people knew when I walked into a conversation, because I'm very direct. We come from similar direct cultures, right? I live in the New York area. I'm very direct. I'm to the point. That doesn't mean that I don't want to collaborate. I'm just going to tell you straight up what's on my mind, what I'm thinking, and how I feel about a specific situation. But I don't want people to view that as being aggressive. It's just my mode of communication, but I'm still here to collaborate. I'm still here to partner with you.
Radical candor. That's how we called it as MuleSoft. It was this book, right? And for my culture, it wasn't that surprising. For others, it was. But yeah, that's truly a thing. There is a question from Poolkit that I want to pull in. Let me see. Poolkit. Nice to meet you. Good that you're here again. Agree with the introductions. In addition to this, I want to add, you have to ask for the customer team to do their own introductions as well. Oftentimes, they take your lead and give you why they are in the meeting as well. That's a good one. I agree. Do you intentionally do this?
Yeah, I will intentionally. Yeah, so especially in new settings where people don't know me, I will start with the why statement. I find that if I'm the first one to set the tone, it's easier. If like half the room has already introduced themselves and I come in with this weird way to introduce myself and I'm not the one leading the discussion, I will tend to follow the lead of the facilitator or moderator of a specific conversation. But yeah, when I'm setting the tone, I do start with the why. Tell me why you're here and tell me a little bit about, who you are.
Yeah, that's cool. How do you introduce yourself in a meeting? Let's say I'm a client.
Yeah. So in a client meeting, oh my gosh. It varies, right? So I think most of the time I will start off with, my role, right? And a lot of times because I am a woman and people tend to not realize what my role might be in the conversation, I do want to make sure that people know that I'm the architect. And what I have done in past, especially when I'm in like a design session with customers, I will let them know, hey, I've had this same conversation. Like as part of my introduction, I'm here because I've had this same conversation that we're going to have today with many other customers. And I hope to bring that experience to this discussion with you so that we can learn a little bit from one another. And that I think always, you can see the face, especially back in the day when I was much younger, you could see the face of folks who, had been in the industry for a long time. They'd be like, okay, we'll still see about that. But yeah.
Can we do a small role play?
Sure.
I heard a story. I was on a call. When was it? 2 days ago or so. And there was a story. Well, and I want you to take one role. It's very simple. So let's assume maybe your organization or a different one, you're working there. You are on your, what level are you? Director level, VP level?
Director, yes.
Director level. So, and you're in the room with a lot of other directors and your manager. So all your direct, right? You have your meeting. Every other person in the room is a guy. Okay.
That's not unheard of.
the VP says, okay, let's start the session, right? Marjorie, could you please take notes?
Oh God.
What would you say?
So, I don't think that's actually happened, right? I think what has happened, and I do want to share this one story, but I'll get back to the what would I say. So a couple of years ago, I was chief of staff for one of the SE leaders here at VMware, and I would always, I felt like, hey, I'm chief of staff of the team. I should take notes, and afterwards I'll distribute it to the team. And after the meeting, this leader comes to me and he's like, why are you taking notes? And I'm like, so that I can keep up with what's going on and make sure that we're tracking things. He's like, no, ask someone else to do it. I want you to pay attention. He's like, you're here for strategic value in your strategic mind. I want you to bring that out to the conversation. When you're busy taking notes, you're not focusing on the discussion, you're focusing on the words. And I will say that I was floored by that. I had never had a leader ever tell me not to take notes, but it was a lesson, a lesson learned in terms of how it's perceived, right, in a discussion. But to your original question, I would ask.
Can we make a short break, because you got an amazing comment?
Yes.
Marjorie is one of the best leaders I've met. First impressions are important, so how you introduce yourself is a crucial step in the conversation. Thank you, Marjorie. Well, this is amazing.
This is amazing, by the way. She's one of you want to talk about an individual who's willing to learn new things and take risks. That's Beatrice.
Great feedback. That proves that your 360 review was flawed. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, but let's come back to what would you say in this role play situation? What would you respond?
The way I would take it is, I'll take notes this time, but for the next meeting, let's make sure that we rotate it, and X person will be taking the notes the next time, to demonstrate that you're a team player, that you're willing to participate, but that you're not the sole person that's going to be taking notes in all future meetings.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And I want to ask one more thing around this. So there was a LinkedIn post, I don't know, a week ago, where it was an entrepreneur, and she said something I found really interesting. She said, like, I'm not a fempreneur, right, or woman CIO or female CIO, whatever CEO. That's not what I am. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a leader. So are you a female sales engineering leader, or are you a leader or IT professional, or you get my point? How would you frame it?
I think so. I think this is a very polarizing discussion, right? There's a lot of opinions on both sides of the house, and I see both points of view. And personally, I think there's merit to both sides, right? One, you want to make sure that you're not differentiating yourself and people viewing your qualities as different or other, right? But on the other side, there's I want other women or other minority groups to feel like there are people like them that exist in higher level roles that they may be interested in attaining, to see that hey, there's an example of someone who did it and they can break through the glass. I want to be able to break through the glass. So I'm more of I'm both, right? I'm a leader. I don't want to be differentiated just because I'm a woman in a conversation, but I also want people to know that I am a woman leader, that I did have to do more things to get to where I am today. I had to fight more battles. That's something that I talk about fairly often. And I think it's extremely important that the industry recognizes that there's still some imbalances there, and we need to change that. We need to make it equal for both sides.
Yeah. Is there, that's great. And I get exactly the point, but what would you say? Are you a female sales engineering leader, or are you a leader?
I'm a sales engineering leader, right? If someone asks me, I'm a sales engineering leader. I don't necessarily call that out, but I don't want it to not be like, I don't walk around saying, don't consider me a woman, right? I want people to know, yes, I'm a woman. Yes, I went through some difficulties. And
I mean, this is obvious, right?
Exactly.
No, that's great. And was the situation By the way, please, people in the crowd, ask questions. I can't believe you have no questions to Marjorie, right? We have her here. But was there a situation where you were treated really differently? Because, I mean, it's also maybe perception-wise, because you were a woman. So was there something in your career, in your life that you say, okay, that changed a bit for me, or where I started to push back or something like this?
Yeah, I think always there's been this notion of, and for me the situation is not just being a woman, right? I recognize that I wear a headscarf and I walk into conversations, and there's this other layer beyond the gender that stands in between me and the person, right? So there's that other complexity for me as an individual that I experience that I need to make sure that I'm breaking down. But I do know that, when I've walked into discussions, especially technical discussions, where my peer will be sitting next to me who's more junior than me, and the customer will ask my peer, and I'm like, no, I'm the senior person. Look over here and answer and talk to me. In fact, I had one individual do this to me, and I pulled him out after the meeting, and I was like, don't you ever do that to me again. And the guy's looking at me like, what did I do? And I was like, every time I spoke to you, you wouldn't look at me. You'd look at my peer. We were having the conversation. Why would you look at him? And he's like, I didn't do that. I'm like, yes, you did. You did it every single time I talked to you. And after that, we went back into the reading room, and he was like, focused, like laser on.
Yeah, it's amazing. Maybe it's something unconscious.
Yeah,
without jumping it, right? So yeah. But it's weird. Okay, yeah, but it's interesting, yeah? That your colleague was then, yeah. Amazing what you need to handle, right, in this kind of situations, like just above the typical technical things you're there for, right, or the consultation. I want to maybe you talked about the why, and I'm not sure I've heard it, but why are you actually in sales engineering?
Yeah. I didn't choose this path, actually. So funny story. The way I landed in a sales engineering role, I was actually in professional services for the majority of my career. So I spent a lot of times, customer interaction, still different path, dealing with post-sales engagements and working with customers on their deployments and designs and whatnot. And the company I worked for at the time had some strategy changes. They were reorganizing their consulting team, and I was placed in the sales organization. And I always tell folks this. I went kicking and screaming. I actually walked out of a meeting after being told, was in tears, and people were like, "What's wrong?" I was like, "I don't want to go into sales." And then little by little, I started learning about the different aspects of the role, the value of your customer engagement, how much more control you have with the solution that the customer buys. Because at PS, you bought it, right? It's done. Now I'm helping you deploy it. So it's a very different dynamic between you and your customer. And I started enjoying it. I had one manager at the time, his name is Rob Robinson, and he calls me and he's like, "Hey, Marjorie," he's like, "So how do you like sales now? Is it better than being in professional services?" I was like, "I love it. I don't think I've ever had a vacation where I didn't have, a customer burning to the ground and someone was calling me to fix a problem." So definitely very, very different. But, I went back into services. So there was a break in time.
Okay.
And then I went to professional services again to lead the Americas team. And then at one point, I called one of the leaders that I worked with, and I was like, I'm ready to go back into sales engineering. And he's like, "Why?" And I said, it's such a different dynamic. The one, you're in a conversation that's so much more welcoming with the customer, right? You're truly having that problem-solving dialogue and trying to help them understand what are some of the big issues that you can help them address. Two, it allows for you to be creative. Like I mentioned, you're the one designing at the beginning what the customer should be doing. When you're in PS, it's been given to you. Here, go put it in the environment. So it allows for you to be creative and have that type of conversation with the customer that you don't get to have on the services side.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. it seems like a lot of pre-sales are really creative and love shaping, right? If it's a deal or a solution, doing the art of the possible. That's really amazing. And Beatrice is there again. She had feedback on our discussion. So the best way to handle unconscious bias, as you put it, Patrick, is to address it head on.
100%. I agree. And I mean, that's probably the only way, right? I think every coaching and mentoring conversation I've had with women who ask me, how do you address this? I'm like, you call it out. If you don't call it out and you're not addressing it, people won't become aware of it. Like you mentioned, like they don't even know that it's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a similar thing, I think, when you learn about objection handling, when people are offensive, right? That you try to find a way that they don't lose their face, right? So that you find a way to express it, that the other side has a chance to escape or make it good again, right? So that's a bit the challenge, I think, to keep your own emotions intact, right?
It's hard.
Yeah. Right. So, and there's one more question. What do you wish for the professional world? I know you, maybe you can talk about this. You are a member of Presets Collective, right?
Yeah.
I think you're an ambassador, you're in the leadership council. What's your dream of the profession? What's your vision?
Yeah, I wish that it becomes more accessible. I think today, the profession, especially in more established companies, I think, startups and SaaS organizations, as they're building out their organizations, they are trying to create this environment where you don't have to have like 100 years worth of experience. I find that being an SE, many times when leaders are recruiting talent, there's a barrier based off of how much experience you have. And I get it, right? We're going in front of customers who want to talk to experienced individuals. But I think that there's an investment that as a profession we need to do to start creating this pipeline of new talent to come in, and talent from varied backgrounds. I think there's a bias in terms of, what type of degree you have or what school you went to, and it limits the potential of who we bring in. So I think for me personally, I think my dream is hope that we make the role much more accessible, something where, organizations that are willing to invest in talent through, whether it be what we call the economic divide, right? How do we bring people over who aren't traditionally from the backgrounds that we tend to hire from, teach them the job and allow them to grow into that, because there's so much potential in individuals that we haven't tapped that talent pool, if we may.
Yeah, that's a great one. I think it was Wendy McHenry. She was on here too, and she said, I think it was Wendy, yeah. But what she said was, when you bring in people, right, in a startup, and you typically ask them to access their network, right? That doesn't make your pool more diverse. Just in the contrary, you get the same people again, right? Yeah. So that's one point to start also, not only network, but maybe trying to get access to people outside, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's beyond that, right? It's also talent pools that, normally we just don't even talk to, right? Think of technical degrees, right? Those 2-year technical programs that we have here, vocational schools, they produce individuals who are super skilled. They know the technology, they understand how it works, but because they haven't been to traditional education, they tend to get discounted a lot of times. So I think it's important that we open those doors to, again, that talent pool that we don't traditionally go after. And I think at the end of the day, it will open up for diversity well beyond gender, right? It will open up to other communities that we traditionally haven't tapped into.
Yeah, I also don't believe that you need a college degree to do sales engineering, right?
I don't have one.
See. Oh, that
Yes.
proves my point.
Yes.
But a question: can you take a course? Can you take 3 years of college, whatever, or school in some way to train this? Is this possible?
It's a very interesting question, and I think about my own journey, as it relates to getting into the profession. I'll say I was very fortunate. I had a lot of mentors and a lot of sponsors throughout my career who saw something in me and pulled me along the way. And not everyone has that, right? And I recognize that. But Pre-Sales Academy, right there, starting off with the program as part of Pre-Sales Collective, where they're teaching folks the job. That's just the beginning, right? That's not going to teach you everything that you need to learn. There's then the technical pieces. What's the technology that you're going to go and sell? But the human skills aspect of it, I think there is potential for us to teach individuals what the role is. How do you do it? How do you have a discovery conversation? How do you, position a solution? How do you ask, crucial questions to the customer to make sure that they're opening up more about the solution? I think that's all teachable. That's not something that people can't learn.
And no matter if I'm no boy or girl, but I'm completely new. And I want to, or maybe I'm fresh from school or whatever, and I want to get into this role because I'm so excited about sales engineering. From your perspective, what should I focus on? Should I be somebody who teaches themselves a bit more about sales and learns the tech on the job? Or should I focus on tech and then hope that my company trains me in becoming better in sales?
It depends on the company that you're going after, right? So if you look at startups and more SaaS companies, I'd say that they are looking for someone who can have that conversation, who can open doors, and they'll teach you the technology, right? But if you're looking at, say, a company like, the big companies like VMware, Cisco, Salesforce, they'll want you to know something about their solution, right? Especially because they're going to put you in front of these companies that are going to spend millions of dollars with us, right? That's the goal, that's the intent and the hope. And in order for a company to be willing to give you that amount of money, they want to be able to trust you. So it depends on the company you're going after, in my opinion. If you're going after a big company, spend time learning about the technology, obviously be able to present yourself, ask questions, know how to have a conversation. But if you're looking at a startup, probably your human skills are probably going to be valued more than your technical skills.
Cool. And let me extend on that. If you have now you have one like headcount, right? So you can hire one person. So now you have two who are equally good, but one person is more on the sales side, the other person is a bit stronger on the technical side. Just given these two choices, whom would you hire?
If I have two headcount, I'll hire them both.
One.
Oh,
you need to choose one. Stronger in sales or stronger in tech?
Yeah.
What would be your...
So for my current team, I would probably go after the technical skills because we are considered an ultra specialist team. So we have to know a lot of technology, right? My team has to know Microsoft Azure, they have to know Google Cloud Platform, they have to know AWS. So there's just so much that they need to be able to talk about. So from my team's perspective, yes. But we are investing this coming year in the college hiring program. And we actually just gave out an offer to an individual a couple of weeks ago. And she's more on the sales side, right? Her skill sets are more sales oriented. And I value that because I think she can bring something and teach it to the team. And then we'll teach her the technology.
Yeah, perfect. And I think there's somebody you know too. This is Lydia. Hi, Lydia. Good to see you. She asked, do you believe that every SE needs to experience both big companies and startups?
Oh my God. I'm very opinionated about this one. I don't think you need to have both. I think it's nice to have, let's say you're a startup person for life, because I think there's different DNA, right? If you're a startup person for life, you should always try and experience a big company. It's different, right? It's not the same like a startup. And the opposite goes for folks who are in big companies. I did do that, and I realized I'm a big company person, so I went back to a big company. But I do think that you should experience it. Always try it out, see if it's something that you will like, and trust me, you'll learn something new, right? There's always something to be said for getting out of your comfort zone if you've been on either side of the house.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Lydia, for the question. Please send everything in that's on your mind. I love Marjorie's answers. I want more of this. Let's come to something that's also on the event, on our event page. So can we talk a bit about leadership principles? So maybe for people, or especially women who want to become leaders in a technical realm like you, what are core principles you would say they have to follow to be successful?
Yeah, I think each individual needs to create their own core principles, right? I don't think there is a single set of principles that should exist that everyone's going after. Personally, mine is about trust and transparency. I think it's extremely important that in my organization, folks feel like they are being empowered to do what they need to do, and that they will always get the information that they need to be able to do their job. So my recommendation for folks that are going into leadership, spend some time with yourself, write down what are some of the key things that are important to you as an individual, and that will come through naturally as a leader, right? Don't force yourself to be something you're not. So just those on paper, make those your principles of who you are on a day-to-day basis.
And what is it a company will want from you as a leader? What do they expect? Or what should I be prepared of to give, maybe?
So as an SE leader, or just in general?
As an SE leader, when I want to become a leader, what would you say? What should you be able to give?
So I think the so it depends on where you are in the chain. But if this is your first frontline leadership role, I know that a lot of times they're looking for you to be the individual that helps guide your team as you're looking to build out your, the territory or region or whatever you call it, right? I think every company has a different name for it. But as you're building out that team, they want you to be able to guide them on how to be effective in their job, provide them coaching, provide them mentorship, and create for them development plans, right? I think one of the big things that an individual wants from their manager and what a company wants you to do to make sure you're keeping your team engaged is understanding what it is that they want next in their career. So there's the business side, and then there's the individual that you're managing and that you're shepherding through, that you need to be able to address both sides.
That's great. And do I need field experience, or can I directly join the leadership role? And associated to that is maybe the question, am I good enough, right? Maybe I'm even younger than the experienced guys in the room. How do I earn respect? So do I need the field part, and how do I earn respect?
So I'll talk about the age piece, but not in an SE context, and then I'll talk about being an SE leader. So my first leadership role was when I turned 28. And if we think about this and think about, the type of technology that I sell, I'm in the infrastructure space, where traditionally it is a more mature industry. Individuals that I was always around were always much older than me. So I was always the young one. I think I thought it was a joke at first, but eventually I realized it was going to be really hard. So I was an extremely young manager, and I will tell you that the challenges that I had was more on, will I get the respect from my team that I need? And I feel that, with demonstration of the skills that I had, bringing empathy to the table, showing them that I trusted them and that I wasn't there to tell them what to do or micromanage them, right? That's not my job. I felt like I gained their trust and their respect through that. So I think there's that aspect of it. The age thing shouldn't be a hindrance, but recognize that others might believe that it's a barrier and you're going to need to break through it, right? And then on the field side, so remember I told you that I went into sales kicking and screaming. I went into a leadership role. I was in a leadership role in the consulting side, and I went into a leadership role on the SE side. So I technically never carried a bag. I was never an SE. So I say you don't need it, right? As long as you've got some type of customer-facing experience, you should be fine.
Is there maybe one piece of skill or knowledge you would love to have, and it only comes from the field and going into the field?
I really wish I would experience the intimate deal negotiation process. I get to see it as a manager, high level, but I never experienced the pains of actually negotiating with a customer back and forth and trying to close that deal at the end. It being my responsibility. I would have loved to experience that, but I've never experienced that as an individual contributor.
Yeah, the rush of
Yes.
the situation, the aggressiveness, the fire. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, but couldn't you, as a leader, be part of a deal anymore?
I'm part of the conversations, but the difference is when you are accountable for it, right? And you have that pressure, and you're the one crafting the deal and crafting the negotiation strategy. It's such a different experience, I think.
Yeah, it is. All right, that's cool. You spoke about mentors before. How important are mentors? And maybe can you share who your mentors were that influenced you a lot?
I have many mentors, and I think that's one important thing for folks is, it's not just one. You should have many individuals who are your mentors that are across the spectrum, right? They can be your peers, junior to you or senior to you, right? So that's the other thing that I want to make sure that folks recognize. But yes, I've had many mentors and many that I continue to keep with, to name a few. David Gregory, he leads our SE organization here. Mei Li Wang, she was both a manager and a direct report at Veritas when we worked together. She's been amazing, and we continue to be very close friends. Yvette Edwards, who today is at VMware as well, we worked together at Symantec and Veritas, and she was a peer and continues to be a peer, but an amazing leader. So, many mentors and people that I rely on a regular basis. And I think it's important to have, again, different kinds of mentor, because they will, one, if they're a peer of yours, they'll easily, one, you can vent more easily to them, but two, they'll also call it how it is. They're not going to try to sugarcoat it for you, right? And they'll be more direct with you. Whereas if it's a management, mentor, they're more trying to guide you and, bring you to that next step. But yeah, I think it's important to have mentors.
Yeah, that would have been a question that I want to dig deeper a bit. Is a mentor someone who kicks your butt, like move, or is it someone who is just there? And what's the difference to a coach then?
Yeah, so definitely, I think a mentor can definitely kick you, right, and be like, what's wrong with you, and wake up and think about this differently and help you really be critical about certain things. The difference between, a coach and a mentor, a coach is more of the person that forces you to look within, right? They're the ones that are saying, tell me more, but why do you think that? What makes you feel that way? What are you considering next? Why are you considering that? And they really force you to think about what you're thinking. So it's a very different role, in my opinion. Coach versus mentor. Coach is very much asking you to get the answers, whereas a mentor may provide their own experiences or even guidance from their own time.
Yeah. And what was one of the greatest advice you got from your mentor, or one of them? What would you pick?
Oh my God. One? There's just so many.
Yeah.
Wow. So I would say it's the, don't settle, right? And don't let people tell you to just be happy and content with what you have. Always continue to strive for more. I've been like I said, I've been very fortunate with the mentors and sponsors that I've had, who've always pushed me really hard and have always said, you have more to give. Where is it? Give more, right? Don't settle with what you're doing today.
That's great. If I think back when I was a student, like 20 years ago or so, no, yeah, oh my God. No, but I remember listening to, was it an audiobook or maybe it was a book, but there was this advice, find a mentor. And I thought, where? I have no network, right? This was time there wasn't really social network, except maybe the beginning on Facebook. But where to find a mentor? So how would you approach that today? So someone who wants to go into the leadership position in sales engineering, and how to find this mentor?
Yeah. So there's a couple of ways to do it. One, there's the, more programmatic and traditional approach. So a lot of companies today, and if your company doesn't have this, I challenge you to ask them to create it. But many companies have mentorship programs where they will pair you up with someone who, you'll identify certain key traits that you're looking for. And then, again, it becomes more programmatic and it's much more structured, which is great if you're just starting out and you're looking for kind of that more structured approach. If, let's say, you're further down in your career and you're like, oh man, I don't know if I have a mentor, pick up the phone and the person that you respect, that you like to go to for advice, be like, hey, can we make this a more official mentor-mentee relationship? Do you mind if we schedule a monthly call? I'll own scheduling that on a monthly basis. And, I'd love to pick your brain for 30, 60 minutes, during that month. And the worst you're going to hear is no, sorry. And you move on and you go find another one. The best will be like, yeah, absolutely. You count me in. I'm here to help you. And most of the times, if it's someone that you already trust, they're going to say yes.
But it's a tough call, right?
Yeah.
In a world where you think, oh, I visited his or her profile, what will she think when she saw that I visited, right? And we're not connected. Like, those are thoughts we have, right? So it's tough to ask other people for a favor.
Be bold. Yeah. That's what I say all the time. Be bold. And what are you going to lose? Nothing. They're going to say no. Okay, move on.
That's interesting. And you have a massive self-confidence. How do you build this up? Or how do you keep this alive? How do you erase these negative thoughts in your mind that tell you you're not good enough, you're not good enough? Are they there or not?
Yeah, I think, obviously everyone has moments of self-doubt, but I will agree that I do tend to be more on the positive side. And I find, I guess that's just something that I just naturally, I used to do play acting as a kid, so I don't know if that contributed to it. And actually, when I talk to individuals who have younger daughters, I'm like, you should put them in some type of acting. And sometimes I do contribute my self-confidence, my willingness to speak up, my willingness to be out there in front of big audiences to that. I used to like to do plays as a kid, and maybe that's helped. I don't know. But throughout the rest of my career as I've aged, I think part of it has also been that I've had individuals who would always say, hey, I think you can do this next. And the fact that there's other people that believe in me, I try to keep at the beginning of my mind to say, you know what, if that person believes in me, then there might be something there. I should go after it.
Yeah. Are you, on a scale, are you more introvert or more extroverted?
I consider myself an ambivert. I mean, when I'm in public, I'm extrovert. I will socialize. I will talk with people. I can strike up a conversation with anybody. But I get drained from it. So on the weekends, when people ask me, what do you do? I'm like, nothing. I just rested. I needed to decompress and get that energy back.
That's interesting. You know the book from Susan Cain, Quiet?
No.
Do you know the book?
No.
Because it's completely on this topic, right? How to be a quiet person in a world where extrovertism is actually something great, right? And she proves some points around introvertism and how important it is that half of the population is actually introverted. And she names ambivert one time, but the main point is that everybody's somewhere on the scale in different situations, and we have something like a free trade agreement. That means we can act out of our introverted nature, for example, and be very social, right? Yeah. And are there issues in the team? Right, we're in sales engineering. I would argue there's a bigger portion of introverted people in the teams because they like tech, they like crunching problems, right? They like maybe work in solitude and come up with great solutions, so great creative minds. That's sometimes a sign for an introvert. That's what Susan Ken actually in some way wrote, right? So is there an issue in your team with that in terms of leading? Because the leadership style affects, right? You have to adjust it to your team in some way.
Yeah, I think like you said, right, technical people tend to have more tendency towards the introverted side, but I find that if you've chosen the path of being a sales engineer, you know what it takes to have to be that, extroverted during the customer conversations. And for individuals who are just learning or just entering the career, there is that coaching period of, hey, the customer was kind of waiting for you to say something. Why didn't you chime in when you had that opportunity? Like, oh, but I didn't want to. And I'm like, no, that's your job. So I think there's that ramp up learning period if you're early in career. But for my organization, again, fairly senior team in terms of experience, they know that they have to be extroverted. They know that they need to be able to connect with the customer fairly easily. And it's extremely important to what we do on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm. And what about if I'm an introvert and want to become leader?
I don't think a label should limit who you are. I'm actually very opinionated on this topic as well. I'm not a fan of the labels. I'm not a fan of the DISC assessments either. I've talked about that fairly often. I think that those labels limit people and what they can do because of whatever system was put in place. Ignore it, right? At the end of the day, you do what you want to do. And the person that's limiting you is you. That's it.
Yeah. There's also a great book from James Quick, I think. Jim Quick, Limitless. And he actually says, every sentence in your head that starts with I am is a limit, right?
Yeah.
I am an introvert. Oh, and suddenly you are, right? And I completely agree with you. Well, what do you say?
It's the and it's not not necessarily the same, but the whole notion of fake it till you make it. I'm a big believer in that. Like if you want to do something, you say I'm going to do it. This is what I'm doing, and I am this because I'm going to go do it. Right? It's the pushing the boundaries that I think is extremely important.
That's the whole reason I do this podcast. Great one. So I have one question in my bag still that I really like, and I want to put it in front of you. What's a failure that made you more successful in the long run?
So this is a funny story that I like to share. So I was interviewing and I was up for my first leader of leaders role. I was, trying to become, manager of managers. And during the interview, I was told, oh, this is a given. You'll get it. It should be fine. And so I walked in with a bit of arrogance because that's kind of the sense that I got. So one, I shouldn't have walked in with the air. I should have kept my humble mindset. But two, one of the interviewers asked me, what was your biggest failure? And honestly, I talk about this fairly often. I hate the question because I've never viewed failures as failures, right? So my response to him was, I don't have any failures. And I was very serious. Like I wasn't joking. I was being very serious. And he's like, what do you mean? And I was like, I've never had any failures in my career. And he's like, that's not possible. I was like, what do you mean by that's not possible? I believe I've never had any failures in my career. So I was very adamant. And again, like I said, I walked into this interview already pretty arrogant, right? So, I leave the interview. I felt fairly confident leaving the interview. I did get the job, right? So I got a chance to chat with the hiring manager right after the interview, an hour afterwards. And he's like, we're going to give you the job. But he's like, what was that all about? I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, that whole, confrontation regarding the failure statement. And I was like, I don't know. I find everything that I do, I learn from it. I don't view it as a failure. It's not a negative thing. And he's like, well, you should have said it that way. You should have been as confrontational. So I think my biggest learning moment has always been to be very explicit about my opinion about failure and how I view it in the future, so that people don't think I'm just being, super arrogant and egotistical, in a specific conversation.
Yeah. That's something sales engineers need to learn in general, right? So check your ego at the door. It's not about you and how good you know the product, right? And then be careful with words, because there is a different meaning for everybody to that. Even your technical terms, right? If you have an abbreviation, what does it mean, right?
Words matter.
Words matter a lot, yeah. That's very true, I can tell you. Okay, there's something else I'm really interested in. Your LinkedIn profile. You have close to 4,000 followers, I think. I would say you're a kind of B2B influencer. How did you build this followership? What was this over time, or are you actively reaching out and building it?
So I would say that it initially started with over time, right? I was never intentional about my social presence and what I did, right? I felt like if there was something that I had to share, I shared it. And a lot of the initial followers or the connections that I had were, people that I knew or that I worked with, and I would always intentionally reach out. I would say in the past two years, I've changed my direction and become more intentional about my social presence. And I've even started working with some of the LinkedIn creator group, and they've given me some tips on, how to be more productive in my posts and how to reach additional followers. So yeah, I would say that there was a point in time where it was just random. It wasn't intentional. Whereas there was a pivot that occurred about 2 years ago where I've become more intentional about it.
Okay, then this question hits like the hammer on the nail, right? But why?
I feel like I've got something to share, and I just want to put it out there. And I think the other aspect of it is there aren't many people like me, right? So not only am I a head covered woman, I'm also Hispanic, right? And in the tech industry, Latinos are very rare. There aren't that many of us. So I'm very intentional about sharing that I'm a Latino woman, Muslim head covered woman. And I want to show that you can break all those boundaries. And here's what I got to say about whatever's on my mind, how I feel about the topic. And hey, if you want to go into this career, you could do it too.
So when I'm allowed to summarize this, you say you're playing with your labels.
Yes.
Yeah, really cool. And this is a follow-up then. What's benefit out of that? So for your job, maybe, for your private life, for your whatever, network, happiness, maybe, emotions?
Yeah. It's fulfilling. It's fulfilling to know that, I'm able to help others. I feel like I received a ton of sponsorship going through my career by luck, right? I didn't intentionally seek out sponsors or mentors, and I was fortunate enough to have it, but that doesn't always happen to folks. So I feel more fulfilled giving back to the community and making sure that people recognize that there are people that want to help you. There are people that are willing to give you advice and share with you some strategies and techniques. So for me, it's more personal fulfillment. From a work perspective, it's stuff that I do outside of work, so it just takes some more time. But it helps my team, right? I think they view it as, hey, can you teach us how to do this? Because we want to share some of our technical know-how and expertise, and they've learned from it as well.
And there's the questions on my list, but I don't find it now. But what do you tell people? What's the biggest myth about social media? When someone says, I don't do this, right? I don't want to do that. What do you think? What's holding them back? What's a myth that is a limit at the end of the label?
They feel that they're bragging or showing off. I think that's the biggest myth, is that they believe that that's what social media is for. And I'm like, it's really not that. You're sharing what's on your mind. If you keep it in your brain all the time, how are they going to know that it exists? How are you going to let the world know that you're a super genius, right? I'm not claiming to be a super genius, but on my team, I've got some amazing ones. And, I always tell them, you have something to share, you should put it out there. So the myth is that they're bragging and they don't want to be braggers. And I'm like, that's not what you're doing.
All right. But do you have people on the team who avoid any social media?
I don't know. I don't think anyone's actually flat out told me that they don't. I mean, everyone on the team has engaged to a certain extent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and let's dig a bit deeper there. Do we make a distinction between your brand as a work and a personal brand? Because there's always discussion, right? What should I post? Should I post from my cat, from my husband, from my spouse, or what? Yeah, you get the point. Or is it completely work, or do you think there should be a mix?
So I think LinkedIn as a platform, right? So let's talk about the platforms. There's different aspects of it, right? LinkedIn as a platform, I do make it more about sharing one, how do more women get access to roles? How can they, grow in their careers? And some people might view that as, hey, that's your personal mission, go take it somewhere else. But I view that as something that's important for the industry, generally speaking. So I do talk about it, but I don't talk about, my spouse. I do talk about my nieces a lot, and because I hope that they can grow to be strong, powerful professionals as well, and I hope that they view that example. So I do talk about them in more of the context of things that they've said, and what that means to me when it comes to thinking about women in our profession, generally speaking. So that's LinkedIn. On Twitter, it tends to be a little bit less formal, and I'll be a little more vocal about specific things that I have that are top of mind. I still don't post, like I'm not a photo poster or anything like that. I don't have Facebook. I don't have Instagram. So, I tend to limit the personal stuff that, it becomes, in my opinion, oversharing for me that I won't do.
All right, great. And you're successful with it, right? So, but now I'm starting out. I'm new in the job. I'm new in the role, and I realize I could be out there, right? So with your company, for example, I have already a huge following, right? If I'm on your blog, for example, and publish something there, or I even connect with your products or share your products on maybe LinkedIn, something like that, right? I get attention easier, so it might be a benefit for me. But what would be an advice that you would give when you start this journey on social media? What's a good way to start?
Yeah, I think one is define your brand and who you are, right? What is it that you want to be talking about on a regular basis? Because that will then define who your followers are and who are the people that want to hear from you.
How do I find that? How do I find that?
I mean, people know who they are. I think so I have an exercise that I give folks, and I ask them a whole bunch of questions around defining their brand. And a lot of times people know, like, what is it that you want to be known as? What are some of the things that you're really good at? What are people around you saying? And how do you want to change that? Is it an intentional brand? So there's some things that, we can workshop through as an individual session. So I do think that you can define it. And then two, everyone always has something in their mind that they're passionate about. There's always something that we care about that we wish more people cared more about. So, putting that as part of your brand statement. And then, like I said, being consistent, I think, is important.
What if my passion is gardening?
The gardening, I don't know if it's going to work on LinkedIn, but I think there's other, and actually, if your passion is gardening, the care of it, right? The lessons you learn around how they're different. And by the way, I've got a bunch of plants behind me. I'm not a gardener. I don't have a green thumb. The fact that they're still alive is a miracle. But to that point, right? It's, there's different types of plants that require different types of watering, different types of lighting, that you learn lessons from that you can then translate into your profession. So how do you bring that over?
Yeah, that's a huge trick. So it's a simple trick, but this merging is actually very effective. Like you use your niece to actually tell a story, right? Yeah. That's the reason, right? This happened to me, and this is what I learned. And I think you can do everything with your passionate topic. You can merge it with your professional topic, right? Yeah. The more distinct, the better, actually.
Yes.
I have one final question for you. This is a bit more private. So I would love to have 2 tips or hacks, life hacks in that sense, about anything. So something truly personal. Give us a stock option tip or something like that, stock tip to invest, or your favorite meal or something like that. So some hacks.
Yeah. So some hacks. So one I would say is don't listen to the detractors, right? I think, there will be detractors in your life every single day. Every single week, there will be someone who will have something negative to say. If you listen to them all the time, you're just going to bring yourself down. So you were talking earlier about positivity and confidence. And part of that comes from I just ignore the detractors. And there have been many in my life, right? If I listened to every single one of them, I wouldn't be here. So that's number one. The second one is, can it just be anything?
Yeah.
Like just anything? Okay, so I'm going to show some stuff here. So you'll see there's 2 paintings behind me. And
Yes.
I have a couple more here that I started doing. And one hack, I would say, if you want to go and like de-stress and go crazy, just to start painting. I find that it's so relaxed. I'm not artistic. I don't know how to draw, but
everybody. Yes.
I have found that like just putting, paint.
Show it to us. Show it to us.
So the 2 behind me, that's 2. And then there's, there's this one, breathe. Take a deep breath.
Nice.
Then we have the wind blowing.
Yeah. And now tell again that you're not artistic, right? This is really good.
And then this one I call coloring outside the lines. So I intentionally made it messy. And then I was like, what do I call this? So this one has a name, and it's called coloring outside the lines. So
beautiful. So yeah, I like those tips. I will start painting now.
Yes, you should.
Great stuff. I mean, Marjorie, it was a huge pleasure to have you here. Thanks for answering all those questions and for giving us so much insight. Any final words from you?
Final words is, whatever you want to do as an SE, if it's to be a social sales engineer or if it's to be more focused on the technical acumen, you can do it. Put your mind to it. Anything you want to do, go do it.
Perfect. Guys, it was a pleasure seeing you all here, guys and girls, of course. Follow Little Phoenix up here. Subscribe to the channel. You know the game. We see us next week. Bye-bye.